Hi, thank you guys for joining us. Today's actually very special because we're actually at the Runehammer headquarters up in Philly. And we have Brandon with us, and we're going to talk about Crown and Skull and his entire kind of process. So thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks.
Super excited to be here. First off, the store looks really cool.
Thanks, yeah. And there's no equipment, which is amazing.
Yeah.
It just always looks like this.
The first time I heard of you was because of Crown and Skull. And my brother, he's been following you for a while, and he was like, dude, check out this book. So he got his book, showed it to me, and I was like, wow, this is freaking awesome. Yeah. But before we get directly into that, I kind of want to know how, because you've done 10 years now.
Yeah.
And so how did you start? Where are you at now?
Well, I started as is widely known, I kind of worked in video games for a long time. And that taught me like lots of creative skills and had great teachers and people to work with. And so then when I was kind of just complete with it, I can't even explain why I was kind of done. I just was. I was just like, love you guys, but I'm going to moonwalk out of here. And then I was just kind of out in the void, like doing like landscaping on my house every day, just like in this complete Zen state. And I think in that Zen state, I was like, hey, maybe I should like pull a new D&D group together. And so we kind of were doing that, and it just sort of naturally started to evolve out of sort of being mocked by my friends. So they would say, well, you should do X, Y, Z because you're an idiot or whatever. And I'd be like, I don't want to do that. And they'd be like, no, it's actually kind of cool. And so like I started my D&D YouTube channel just on a dare from my friends in a channel called Cult Moo. And they were like sort of like barfing on YouTube. And they're like, you should do this. It'll be funny. And I was just like, I could do better than you guys. And so it was just like a goofy thing. And then that's also when like my first book was like kind of coming together. And I honestly was just kind of mowing my lawn every week. I really was not thinking about which is weird for me. I'm actually kind of ambitious generally. But there was a nice 10-year spread there where I did not feel very ambitious. I was just kind of like doing stuff. And yeah, I don't know. Just one thing led to another a little bit. Just people were being really nice and really supportive. And they'd be like, wow, this is dope. Like I did my first novel, and it was kind of like written in this almost like childish kind of high-voiced thing, like low. Like there's a lot of the use of the word low in that book. And at first, it was kind of meant to be silly. But it kind of did have it had a mood to it. And so some people in my little town in Washington State read it, and they were like, dude, there's got to be another novel. And I was like, no, this is it. I don't know what I'm doing. And they're like, there's got to be a second one. And so I would just kind of respond to people. I wasn't necessarily like setting out to do this like Runehammer journey. But as sort of an artist and creative person, I do thrive on praise and attention, obviously, right?
What else do we do?
Yeah. So if somebody's just like, yo, this is so cool, you should make it bigger. You should, put it into a cooler format, blah, blah, blah. I would always be like, yes, okay. And then so that just chain reacted one thing to the next, all the way, right up to the second volume of Crown and Skull.
So it's been 10 years, but you haven't had the store the entire time.
Yeah, just about 6 months.
Yeah. So why open a store? Why not stick to what you were doing
before? Man. Well, there's a bit of a broken record story to it. I don't think we ever had the idea of the way to make money in this world. Open a hobby shop. No one has ever said that. So what kind of happened is that we had a really good group, and I'm really, really grateful and lucky with my player group, is that they've been stalwart for now over 5 years. And so we're playing at the one guy's house, and then he gets a different apartment. Then we're playing in the basement, and then we're in somebody's kitchen. Yeah. And on it goes, and then we're like, we're so annoying. We got to stop being annoying. Let's play in bars. So then we're playing in bars, and the tab is way too big, and so we started kicking around this idea, what if we had a warehouse, and it was way too big, and there's just a table in the middle, and it's all dark, and there's one lamp, this kind of Batman level D&D. And then kind of as we got more excited about it, each time it was talked about, it got crazier. And so it became, what if there were two tables, so that someone could annoy us at the other table, and then it'd be like, well, hold up though. What if you could what if there was a bar in there? And they'd be like, dude, there's licensing issues with that. And it just went on and on and on. And meanwhile, at my house, my whole sort of Runehammer business was absolutely bursting. There was books and model supplies and YouTube equipment and stuff everywhere in my tiny little room.
Yeah.
And I kind of did hit a bit of a moment after doing, like almost 600 videos on YouTube of getting this weird feeling like I don't really know if I want to be like a dude in his room.
Yeah.
Like I'm 51 years old, you guys. Like I shouldn't just be in my room all the time. And so between those two things, we kind of just saw this building being built, and this is where we walk our dog. So it felt like we belonged here. We weren't like intruders. And none of the adults that I talked to about it said no. So we just kind of like water slid our way right into like having a building. And then it's like, that's when it got really real. And then we still had about 14 months to actually open the door. So that was the hardest part.
Right.
But the origin of it really was just, we wanted just a place to play.
Yeah.
And it just flew out of control.
Now I kind of want to talk about Crown and Skull because it's what got me interested in your entire brand.
Cool, yeah.
From what I've been able to tell is you pretty much made this game out of all the most fun elements of other RPGs. Am I correct? Or
if I did, I guess I succeeded.
Yes.
I don't know if I set out to do that. If you're discussing like sort of where it came from, its origin was I did want to flip things on their head a bit. I was seeing, how do you put it? Since about 2015, the indie scene has evolved vastly, and it's been amazing to watch. You've had both the sort of the 5e publishing side of people doing like third-party stuff, as well as the kind of OSR, old school kind of crazy indie group, and even like sort of Morkborgy craziness. And it's all evolved so much. I was really seeing myself just like, what am I going to do that's going to be interesting? And so on the one hand, I wanted to flip things upside down a bit. But when I found myself thinking, wow, I am so creative flipping things upside down, I kept getting this weird feeling like this feels familiar. So I had to go do my homework. And really, Crown and Skull has its design roots in Fantasy Hero from 1985. And it had worked its way into my subconscious that we played a 2-year Fantasy Hero campaign at the end of high school. And then our GM, Dave, he was in the Marines, and he was like, graduated before us, and he had to go off into the military, and that ended our campaign. So I think I repressed the memory because it was so traumatic. But the impact of that had stayed with me about, doing phases and roll under and point build, like custom spells. And all those things appear in Fantasy Hero. So then I felt kind of like, wow, this is cool because I'm not just kind of pulling this out of thin air to be different.
Yeah.
I was like, this has roots. Like they go way, and Fantasy Hero is all but forgotten. So that felt really cool to go back and like print out a PDF of Fantasy Hero and see the parts that aged poorly, that are too detailed, and then see the parts that, it's like, I don't know, it's like finding a gem in an old library a little bit. And you're like, oh, wow, like this is so forgotten. This is great. So like those pieces started working together to become at least the mechanical roots of Crown and Skull.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And then, so how about the story? Because you have a story with like the Frogkin, and how was that also from that? Or
no, part of it, about a third of it comes directly from playing with my group.
Okay.
So before Crown and Skull existed, we were playing in AD&D/OSE. So, kind of like first edition, first edition. And about 3 years of that is kind of some of the foundations of the sort of fictional side of Crown and Skull.
Okay.
So, like so many sort of DM writer double hat wearers, you take your player's stuff and you pretend you made it up and put it in a book. Like crazy original, right? It's almost like 6 people came up with this. So that's kind of one of the bigger pieces. And then as I was putting it together, I just had my own grocery list of items I wanted to get in there. Like the froggish people and some other kind of nuancy bits that kind of would kind of weave it together. And, wanted to experiment with this idea of a role-playing book that kind of feels like a novel and like kind of play that weird soupy kind of game. And, when you're playing around in that soup, you can't just sort of mine events from a game because they kind of can feel that way. So you got to make some of them up.
Yeah.
Like where where the old mentor is burned alive by the dragon and the apprentice escapes because she hides under a rock. You know, that never happened in a game, but I knew I needed that moment because I knew I wanted my dragons to feel that way. And so little things like that, you know, I needed to get my own, you know, kind of frozen pizza, even though we have all these like vegetables in the grocery cart, so to speak. I knew that I needed a couple of these kind of candy like treats. And so that's where the sort of story side came from. And then it starts to just kind of make itself. You know, at a certain point, you look at the map, you have a sense of what the style is, and it just tells you where the holes are, and you just need to be honest and follow it.
Okay.
You know, so that's kind of how that all came together.
Your second book just came out.
Yeah.
What exactly is that one about? Well, how does it compare to the first one? And then I know you have more in store in the future, but what's special about your second one?
Yeah, so Volume 2 is chronological for starters. So it picks up right at the end of Volume 1. Okay. So there's like a brief period of a couple decades where you kind of get the players will fill that in. They'll live in there. And then basically there's sort of a little bit of a civil war brewing. And because of this, there's a silver dragon, which they haven't been seen for a really long time, and they're like the noblest of them all, is like the companion of the king, and he like raises it like a dog, sort of. And it's like an omen of good. It's like the white buffalo, right? And so the sort of the catalyst of the second book is that they find this silver dragon, Varthisian is his name. They find him like butchered, and he's like cut up into pieces, and a bunch of the pieces are missing. And it's such a crime against dragonkind that they all kind of wake up and get pissed. And they kind of come out of their dormancy and they're angry. And that's how Volume 2 begins. So story-wise, I just wanted this to happen. Yeah. But mechanically, I wanted to do a book that I felt I never got. The Draconomicon from back in second edition was close, but a book that gave me practical routes to go mess with dragons, be they your friends, your enemies, or neutral, but you could get very cut and dry way to be like go from 0 to 60 on like a dragon type adventure. So it's like, we want to go hunt one, we just want to kill it. Okay, cool, let's do that adventure. But then have another one like the opener in the book is, you know, a dragon in like a buried starship, and that is like not go kill it, it's vastly more complicated. But that was the mechanical premise, is that if you want a dragon in your game, here are like sort of 6 to 8 big options to directly, you know, and then everything else in the book just tries to serve that. Like, I don't know, you don't play much D&D before somebody loots like a dragon corpse. Yeah. And what do you get? And we always had to make that up, you know, like fangs or an eyeball or a scale shield or something. And I didn't want to have to make it up anymore. Yeah. So I wanted to get, so there's a whole thing dedicated in there about dragoncraft, and it's what can you take from a body? What can you make it into? And then the culture around it, like it's kind of forbidden. Like if you're seen wearing like a dragon bone on one arm as armor, that's like, dude, no, what are you doing? Like you're going to bring it upon us. And then all those fun sort of rabbit holes that the dragon stories just lead you down. So it's kind of like, in the first volume, you know, if your book leads you down a rabbit hole, to me at least, the creative process is just being honest with that's what needs to happen. Right. And being like, oh my God, okay, fine, all right, let's do a whole thing about that. And then, you know, it also sort of covers like the periphery. So there's always going to be a village with weird people that worship it instead of hate it. And so I had to do a whole bunch of tables on, you know, the kind of the minions and the villages and the cults that surround dragons. So that you aren't just making all this stuff up over and over, which is what I've always done. And like, so the simplest one is like Zamoth. It's just a big dragon on top of a pyramid and there's no adventure. It's just sitting there and you walk up to it, roll initiative, right? And then the most complex of them is like Paramus, who's like a grieving dragon who's trying to like manipulate time, and it's not working because you can't manipulate time. Everybody knows that from every story. But she won't accept that, and she's like being torn into like a sort of a multiverse version of herself. And one of her selves is sad and the other self is like enraged, and she's like kind of comes in and out of being one and being multiple, and it's just like, whoa. So it kind of covers that gamut, you know.
You're the ultimate person for Crown and Skull. What tips would you recommend for new players or new GMs on how to run Crown and Skull?
Tips for the Crown and Skull GM. So the monsters especially run themselves. So they are built with their own tactics, and it takes away that weird feeling of like, what should I do? Should I just wipe them out?
Yeah.
Or should I act dumb and like wiggle around, like Pokemon off turn?
Yeah.
But for the GM, I mean, I don't think there's a lot of crazy new things to consider. Probably the hardest thing from what people have been telling me is Crown and Skull likes to differentiate the heroes more than normal. It really wants them to be different. So since there's no stats, everybody doesn't just have a strength stat.
Yeah.
So there's a guy with a muscle skill, and there's a guy that doesn't. And if that's the case, somebody says, well, I really want to try to push this rock down this hill. You can't even try.
Yeah.
It's just a hard no. You cannot do it. And I think early on for GMs, that could be a little bit of a mind breaker.
Yeah, I think that's the first thing I noticed. I was like, what do you mean I can't? Because usually it's like, oh no, it's just a really difficult role.
Yep.
But in this case, it felt refreshing to just not be able to do it. And just kind of give that control to another player. It's like, no, you can do this. I can't. But I'm good at this, and you can't do that.
Yeah, and one way we do it is like, could any person do this?
Yeah.
If that's the case, then we can make up a roll. And that's like when we use like a flat roll.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah,
a 6
yeah.
under.
Yeah.
So in that case, sure, like can a person kind of slide down a chimney
Yeah.
and kind of land on their butt and take 1 damage or something?
Yeah.
Sure. So it's a 6 under to not like totally float.
Yeah.
But if it's anything of remarkable ability, there's no hope.
Yeah.
Like let me jump from building to building. There's no dex roll.
Yeah.
You're just never going to make it.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah.
And at first, that feels like being cheated. Like, what are you talking about? This is D&D, bro. Dex check. Am I right? You can't even try. And at first, it does feel horrible, but in time, if you accept it, it just makes everything more interesting. It just creates less overlap between the players.
Yeah.
So that's, for the GM, probably the biggest hurdle to make. Yeah.
Yeah, I think my favorite thing was just the attrition and just having that narratively just as in, I don't know, like, 'cause damage, I don't like hit points.
Right.
And just having attrition is like, oh, you get hit in the legs, so now you can't jump. I mean,
Yeah.
it feels like just a great way to push a story even in combat.
Yeah, and I mean, it works great. The main critique to absolutely accept is that it's the worst death spiral in any RPG. So if you see a death spiral as like a problem in an RPG's design, just don't even walk in the door with Crown and Skull. It's an absolute death spiral. But it's mitigatable by either finding gear or, just having skill-based healing, so that your healer kind of is keeping you out of the death spiral. Rather than a little bit what you allude to maybe, which is that you're good to go all the way to 1 hit point.
Yeah.
And I do think there's a lot of merit in both. It's all just about what season you're in, And so it's kind of like a lot of folks like to compare like 5.5 D&D and like old school.
Yeah.
That's like the most talked about thing.
Yeah.
They both have a season, and they're great when they're the off season. So it's like you're playing, BX for 5 years straight. Then you come into brand new D&D, it's heaven. But if you've been playing 5th edition for 5 years, and then someone says, yo, you want to try Morkborg, it's heaven.
Yeah.
Both are awesome as counterpoints. And I think that's why the death spiral is a bit spicy.
Yeah.
But if you're eating ice cream, it's great to have some spicy.
Yeah.
And then if you're playing Crown and Skull, for like 2 years straight, you're probably going to be like, can I just have some gear for like one session? And then it's going to be great to not have attrition. So things just have their place depending on like where the variety of your hobby flow is. So I think that critique of being like, yo, Crown and Skull's insane. Like my character sucks. Like after like 3 hits, I can't do any. Like I can't even do diplomacy right now. Like I have like such a big black eye that I can't. And it's ridiculous. But it is a great relief if you're in that place where you're like, man, I've had 70 hit points for so long. I'm so weary with it. So yeah, that's where all that came from.
Well, I think lastly, you have a 3rd book that's going to be coming in the future. Do you have any ideas on what it's going to be or anything you can give us?
Well, it's been a terrifying journey so far. So again, I wanted to do sequential, so chronological. So the end of the Dragon book is no bueno, but in case I don't want to do too many spoilers, but it's not good. And then I wanted to take that, and I'm a huge X-Men freak, especially the Chris Claremont era, and I wanted to make a tribute to that and put together this whole thing, the Ultimates, and I was kind of going to do a fantasy world with these X-Men-like factions and a whole power system and all this great stuff and tributes to Magneto and everything. Put a year of work into it, and for some reason I think the concept of supers is too modern, and it just I couldn't get that poetic magic to happen where it was rabbit holing me.
Yeah. So
I just like scrapped the whole thing. And I did a bunch of art for it and all this, and I just said, I don't think this is it. This isn't the vibe. So I just had to face it and just walk away from it.
Yeah.
So I'm right in the state right now of thinking that the deadline of Volume 3 is less important than the soul of it.
100%.
And that's not an easy thing to face.
Yeah.
You know, when the momentum is so great on Crown and Skull, and like also the whole environment just gets more competitive every year. So that is not an easy thing to just openly be like, I bailed on a year of work. Yeah. But I don't know, it's a little bit, one of the nice things about having like a sort of multifaceted approach is you can't just kind of focus on neighborhood people for a while, kind of refill the well a little bit and be like, okay, I just want to stay in my fantasy world. I'm not ready for superheroes. Yeah. You know, it's clearly out of my pay grade. So I'm just kind of working on it right now. I do think that the froggish people in my world are kind of ready for their spotlight. Even in the second book, they don't fully get that. They are in the second book. The dragon in that book is not even or that adventure is not even a dragon. It's actually like a carving. It's the black dragon is what they call it, but it's just a big mural. Yeah. And so the heroes kind of think they're looking for this black dragon, but it's actually this mural. Yeah. But that's the appearance of the frog folk in Volume 2, and it's just kind of small. Yeah. So I do think maybe there's like a Kurosawa frog book that could be cool. So I don't really know what that is yet. But that's all I can give you at the moment. That's kind of where I'm like have a lump of clay. I'm trying to make Lionel Richie, but it's just it's just a cone right now.
Well, I'm excited for it to come out, and I mean, take your time because every book so far, the one that I have, is perfect.
Oh, sweet! Thank you.
And I mean, whatever you're doing, keep doing it.
I will. I think it's all but unavoidable at this. If I could stop, I would. Yeah. But I'm constantly informed by everybody that knows me of just like, there's no stopping. I had this whole fantasy of doing like fish taxidermy. And I was like, you guys, I'm done with all this crazy stuff. I'm just going to like make like fiberglass trout. Yeah. And they're going to be divine. These things are going to be amazing. Like, what are you talking? That's impossible, dude. You're always going to be going down some weird creative rabbit hole. I was like, thanks for the doom saying. Yeah. There's no escape for me.
Awesome. Well, I mean, I think that's all I had.
Great.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys for watching. Thank you for having me. This has been a blast. Store looks awesome. And here's to another 10 years.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it.
Awesome.
See you around.